Maar gezien we het Git gebencht shiur, we'll get started now.
There's nobody here.
You're here.
Yeah, this is not official.
So Akiva asked me to announce that tonight's shiur should be Le'ilul Nishmas' mother-in-law, whose Yortzeit is Thursday, Sarah Bas Avram, and he wanted me to say over Le'ilul Nishmasai, why is it that in Chabad they don't say slichas between Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur? And the Tzemach Tzedek said it is because Aseret Tshuva is a time for action, not for words. So rather than spend time saying slichas, we should do mitzvahs and do deeds rather than actions, rather than words. So her neshama should have an aliyah. And in the schus of us doing deeds, we do say slichas. So we have to do slichas and do deeds. That's schus she should have an aliyah neshama. And we should have the geula soon. So let's get started. We are about 8 lines from the top of Daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, "Ahu gavra the nafla le yavama b'masa machas." This fellow had a brother who died, and now his sister-in-law fell to him. Now he was going to take over and yarshin all of the assets of his deceased brother. But he had other brothers as well, and they didn't want that because they wanted to share in the estate as well. So they wanted to mess up his opportunity to do evil. So bo achva lemifsala begita mine. They wanted to give this woman a get, and that midirabanan ashers anyone to do evil. Once no one can do evil, one of the brothers have to do chalitza, and then they'll split the estate evenly. So the brother that wanted to do evil said, "Amrle, my daita. Why do you want to mess this up?"
Yes. Didn't we learn back in Yavamis that it's the closest brother, the oldest brother that goes first?
Yes, that's true. But that if one of the brothers just goes and gives a get, he messes it up for everybody.
Oh.
So that's what's supposed to happen, but they didn't follow the rules. So the oldest, the brother that wanted to do even said, "Ma daita, if it's only because you want half of my brother's estate, I'm willing to split it with you. I'm willing to split it with you." Now we had on Daf Pei Aleph, someone did the same thing, and then after he did Yibum and he wanted to give the half of the estate to his brother, Rabbi Yosy said you can't do that because you're not allowed to liquidate any part of the estate. It has to be kept for Kesubos. And if you try doing it, it doesn't work. So the brother sort of conned the brother. The brother wanted to give a get to mess up the Yibum. He got hoodwinked because the brother wanted to do Yibum. He said, don't worry, let me do the Yibum. And you'll get your money anyway. And what happens afterwards? You couldn't get the money because Rabbi Yosef didn't let. So this fellow didn't want to get hoodwinked for that. So Amalei, I don't trust you that you're going to give me half to the chasam later because Mistafina, the Avdas Li, you're going to do us over the Pamadisa crooks, the English Ganev, like they say. Or they say Aramenische, I'm a git shulim for Aramenische, that I'm ibit side of the fingers. So Rashi brings down from the Gemara Chulen these Geshemaka stereotypes. If someone from the Rishah kisses you, money kakech, tzayne with the tzayne, especially if you have gold tzayne. If you have someone from Pamadisa who's going to walk you and escort you to your hotel, you know what you should do as soon as you get back to your hotel? I would change your hotel because he's just escorting you so he could know where you're staying, so he knows how to mug you. So therefore the people from Pumbedisa were considered crooks. So this brother said, "Don't pull up Pumbedisa on me, and I'm not gonna give in. I'm gonna give the get now." Omalechu, the brother said, "No, trust me. I'm even willing to do such a deal with you. I'll do as follows. I'll say, I'm giving you the nechasim from that. So even though he doesn't even have those nechasim, he was going to tell him to make a weird transaction. Again, he was just trying to hoodwink the guy because the transaction that he was suggesting is an impossible transaction. And he told him as follows, grab already your part now. Even though you're not going to be coining it now, because I don't even have it yet. But when I do the ibum, the esker bekulam, and then I will be zoicha in all my late brother's estate. At that point, then you will get your half. Based on that you took it now. So this is like we're contorting logic. It doesn't make sense. But again, he's trying to just stop his brother from messing up his evil.
But if he would have done chalitza to her, does she get to keep all of her previous husband's assets? Or
No, then all the brothers split it evenly.
So look, Rashi said that he says, oh, don't worry, take what you want because either ad she'echnes or she'echloik.
Right, so that's a little bit difficult. That's a good point. It's a little bit difficult in Rashi because echloik doesn't make sense because if he did chalitza, in fact, everybody would split it.
Right.
That's correct. So he was just trying to hoodwink him. He was trying to get him to agree, and then he would make Yibum, and then he would cut his brother out. So Zog to Gemara, Amar Marbar Avashi, this would never have worked. Even though when Rabdimi came, he said over in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that if someone has a cow and he tells his friend with his cow, make a mashicha on my cow right now, but the kinyan will only happen in 30 days. You're doing the mashicha now, and magically you're going to be kinyan in 30 days, even though the mashicha is long done. Yet Rabbi Yochanan said, after 30 days, in fact, that would work. Even if the animal is not in the rishus of the person who's koined. So at that point, there's no way for him to be koined. The mashiach is over. It's not on his property. Yet the mashiach from 30 days ago will create a kinyan. There it would work. You know why? Because hasam biyada. In the case of the animal, if I want it, I can give it to him right now. I can tell him, take it now and be koined now. So therefore, I can say, take it now and be koined in 30 days. But in the case of Yibum, right now, the brother doesn't own anything at all. Until he does the Yibum, he doesn't own anything. So I can't give you something later, now, if it's not mine yet now. The whole thing doesn't make sense.
But that's not the problem. The problem is he's never going to be allowed to give it over.
Right, that's also true.
So why are they discussing this?
So this whole transaction doesn't make sense. I can't give it over later. I can't give it over now. So in other words, he's basically once again fooling his brother by outloving him with faulty logic to accept it. Now it doesn't say that he accepted it, but that's what he did. So now the Gemara is stepping aside from Yibum, and now we're just looking at what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Yochanan said that if you make a Mashiach on a Torah, you'll be koined in 30 days. How is that possible? Actually, Rabbi Yochanan said that wouldn't be koined, which is the most logical. How could you be koined? How could you be koined later when nothing's happening? I'll explain to you why you're koined in one case and why you're not koined in the other place. When do you say that the kinyan will work in 30 days? That's when he said knimei achshav. Because what he's really saying is, I want you to be koined my animal now with your mashicha that's happening now, but I'm putting a t'nai into the kinyan. The t'nai is that the date of 30 days from today should arrive. So once the t'nai is fulfilled and the date of 30 days from today arrives, the kinyan is chal back when you made the mashicha. That will work because the kinyan is being chal when you made the mashicha. But if I'm telling you, make mashicha now and be koined in 30 days, that doesn't work because in 30 days there's no mashicha happening. So they asked a question of Hula. What if someone did Yibum and then he decided that he wants to share with his brother some of the estate? Mahu watalach. So we already learned yesterday. Of course it doesn't work. And in fact, that's what Hula answered. Of course, he can't give it away. It's locked in, he has to hold on to it. What about chilek v'achach? What if before he did Yibum, he gave away part of his brother's estate, which again makes no sense at all because it's not his yet. Mao, so Ula said, of course, it doesn't work. Matzka Flor Rapsheshes. So Rapsheshes asked, why did Ula need to say these two piskei halacha. Hashtu yovim va'achar achilak loy, also like lum. If after he married this woman and he took possession of all the estate, he still can't give it away. Surely before he even does yibum, he can't give it away. It's not his yet. So why would Ula say these two halachas? Dr. Gemara, Ula didn't say these two halachas. We're just relating two stories. One person came to ask him this shaila, and he answered that it doesn't work. And one person came to ask him this shaila, and he answered it doesn't work. But he wasn't saying these halachas, because of course, Hilek Bachach Yibum is not a chiddush at all. But if someone asked him a shaila, he has to answer. He also Rabin, Omer Shlokish, Ben Yavim V'achach Hilek, Ben Hilek V'achach Yavim, also like Lum, like we just said, the Hilchas are also like Lum. A person who does Yibum and tries to liquidate or sell or give away any of the assets of the deceased brother, it doesn't work. Not all, like we learned on Pei. Okay. So what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said the general rule is that any assets that the brother who did Yibum, Yarshins, he cannot sell those assets. They have to be maintained, preserved. He can eat the payers from them, but the actual principle has to remain. So the Mishnah discusses what if, when his brother died, he left him a field that had payers in it that were connected to the ground. So the Mishnah says, Shaloi, they're his. But that's not accurate. They're not his. He has to sell those payers and buy more property with it, because that's part of what came in the estate. So why does the Mishnah Shaloi get to keep it when he doesn't get to consume those payers? Those payers have to be sold and property has to be purchased with them. Amai break the Gemara. So he's not allowed to consume those payers. They would have to become karka. He'd have to sell them and buy karka. Omer Shlokish, you're right. Tani Shalah. It really means payers on karka is Shalah. Meaning it's not really hers. It just means it has to be preserved to be able to give her as collateral for it.
But it said Shalah. You didn't say Shalah.
Right. So we have to change the words. We have to change the words of the Mishnah. We're actually correcting the Mishnah.
Mm-hmm. But what, going onward, going further, any future payers he's allowed to use and sell, right?
That's right. So after you take a snapshot at the time of the death, you take everything that's there, and you liquidate it and you put it into property, and that property, the principal remains for her, but all the payers that comes after that point, he gets that. Okay. Kontra Reikishta. When someone does Yibum, now this woman is like a regular wife to him. What halacha is she like a regular wife? What special chiddush is the Mishnah trying to tell us that she's like a regular wife? It teaches you two things. A is, now if he wants to divorce her, he gives her a get. He doesn't need to give her chalitza anymore. That zika is already removed. Now she's a regular married woman who is released with a get. That's number one. And number two is machzira. He could marry her again. If he divorces her, he could marry her again. And the Gemara is going to tell us in a second, you might think that once he did the mitzvah of Yibum and he married her, if he divorces her, he can't marry her again because it's his brother's wife. Kamash Malon, that once he married her, she's like a regular wife and all of the previous Yisurim are no longer relevant. Megarsha beget pshita. Correct the Gemara, why do I need the Mishnah to tell me that you're Megarsha with a get? Why would I think otherwise? So Gemara Mao the Tema v'Yibmam Rachmana v'Adayin Yibum and Harishanim Allah, and therefore let's just club again. So let's look at the pasuk itself. The pasuk says, "Loisia Eshes Hamei Sachutza Leizar." Rather, Yivama Yavay Allah uLekachalei Leisha. The Yavim should marry her and take her as a wife. Period. Then the pasuk adds on v'Yibma. So it sounds a little funny. After he already took her as a wife, and after she's his wife, the Yibma, there's a din Yibum. Once she's his wife, don't we say that the whole Yibum is over? From that Yibum to Matra, there's still some Yibum left in this marriage. So therefore, if there's still some Yibum left in this marriage, because it says the Yibma after he already married her, you might think that if he wants to divorce her, it's not enough to just give her a get. He would also have to give her chalitza. Kamash Malon, that a get is good. So you might ask me, okay, fine. but it does say v'yibma. You're telling me Kamashmal ignore the v'yibma and say it gets enough, you don't need chalitza. So what is the word v'yibma telling you? So we learned in Yavamis what that teaches us. And Rashi, I think, mentions it here. The Yibma tells us that he could make Yibum even against her will. Yibum is done, the husband can do it even if it's against her will. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Machzira. Once he divorces her, since she's like a regular married woman, and he divorced her, he's allowed to take her back. Again, Pshita. Why do I need our Mishnah to tell me that once she did the Yibum, she has the status of a regular wife, and if he divorces her, he could take her back? Talk to Gemara. I'll tell you what the Chiddush is. Turning on to Pevez Amud Beis. Mao de Tema. You might think mitzvah de Rama Rachmana Alei Avda. The mitzvah of Yibum, he completed already. He fulfilled. He did the mitzvah. So therefore, if he divorced her, he shouldn't be able to marry her again, because now it's his brother's wife. Bahashta take him Alei Be'Isra Shazach. Kamash Malan, that once he marries her, she's no longer subject to any of the previous Yisurim, and therefore, if he divorces her, he can take her back. Maybe you're right. Maybe those Yisurim do come back. Maybe once he was Mekayim the mitzvah even when he married her, maybe if he divorced her, he shouldn't be able to take her back. When he takes her, she has the status of any other wife. And that means even and a regular wife, if you divorce, you could marry her again if you're not afraid. So Tyson asks a very important question. The Gemara says in the Havamina that after he divorces her, he can't take her back. Why? Because now you have the Yisrael. Well, take it a step further, Tyson. Maybe even when he does Yibum on her, after the first Bia, where he's Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum, maybe he shouldn't be able to make the second Bia because he already did a mitzvah. Why did he only worry after he divorced her? Even before he divorced her. Once he did a mitzvah, he no longer has a heter of Yibum. So let's see Toysus, the top Toysus.
Yes, they should really ask. Yes, they should really ask the Shaila after they have one kid, because the main thing is to carry on his name. So it's after they have the kid they should.
Okay, that would be a question as well.
You haven't achieved anything by just having Bia with her, unless.
Well, because the mitzvah is Bia. You're Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum even if no child is born. But I deher, at least till she has a kid, that should be allowed. I deher that. So Toshua says, "Hapshita the cheshayabma muter love aleha be'iris harbe." Kamay shirta, and you won't say v'lestan lememar, and you for sure wouldn't make such an argument. Mitzvah the Rama Rachman alei Ada be'ir Rishayna. She already accomplished the mitzvah of Yibum with the first bia. The Svarahu, it's logical to say the Le'amar Rachman ve'Yibma kedei lagar shala'alter. The Torah surely doesn't mean you should do Yibum and then turn around and divorce her right away. And there's also an element of derech da'chenaya. It's not right. You make her marry for one night and then throw her out. But when you're talking about it, he divorced her and now he wants to take her back, they're already ema tekum the Israel Shasach. There the Gemara thought maybe you wouldn't be able to take her back. Kamashal that you could. Okay, then the Mishnah continues and says, Bilvad shetahei Kesubos al nichsei bailo harisha. When the Yobim does Yibum, he doesn't have to have his own ksuba. All of those assets that he inherited from his brother, it's those assets that are Meshubah to Ksuba. None of his assets are Meshubah to Ksuba because he literally stepped into his brother's shoes. My time was the reason, Dr. Mora, Isha Hiknu Levin Hashemayim. He didn't marry this woman. The Torah gifted her to him, so therefore he doesn't have to put up all of his own collateral. However, we never want a woman to feel insecure in her marriage. And therefore, if her brother, her first husband died penniless, and in fact there was nothing for her to rely on, even though Meikra did, the second husband who did Yibum shouldn't have to put up any collateral for the Ksuba, Islam Misheni, we do insist that she has Ksuba from the second husband, from his personal assets, Kedei Shaloi Tehe Kala Be'enim Loitzia. So it shouldn't be easy for him to divorce her. He'll know that if he divorces her, it's going to come at a cost, and therefore she'll have more security in her marriage. Okay, then the Mishnah goes on, and the Mishnah tells us that a Yovim who married his Yavama shouldn't tell her, don't force me to lock up all the assets of my brother. here, what is your ksuba? $1,000. Here's $100,000 diamond. Take it. That'll be your ksuba. So why is it? That you want me to lock everything up? So the Mishnah says, Lo yoimel harek ksubasayach. So the Mishnah said this about a person who did Yibam, and then the Mishnah says, and the same thing applies to a regular woman, never mind the Yibam. If a man marries a woman and he owes her $20,000 in ksuba, he could tell her, why don't you give up the lien on all my assets, and here's a diamond that's more than enough to cover your ksuba, so you are reassured, and release the lien of my other property. This way, if I sell them, I'll make more money for them. So the Mishnah says this same halacha twice, and we already learned that this is not a halacha forbidding him to do this. It's merely saying it's not a good idea. Why? Because if she relinquishes her rights, her lien on all his properties, and she puts all her faith into this diamond or whatever it is that he set aside for her, what if that diamond goes missing? Now he's stuck without a ksuba, and he can't live with his wife until he writes a new ksuba. So therefore, it's not smart to have her release the lien on the karkoyas and put it all on this one piece of property, piece of movable property, like a diamond, because should it get lost, now he's stuck without a ksuba, and he's got to run in the middle of the night to the rabbi to write him a new ksuba. So therefore, he shouldn't do it. That's what the Gemara explains. So it wasn't a prohibition, it was advice. Why would we need the same advice given to a regular husband as we have given to a Yavama? Because the Mishnah really says the same thing twice. A person who's married to Yavama shouldn't do this, and a regular man who's married shouldn't do this. It's the same thing. Why is there a need to repeat the same advice to a regular married man? So the halacha is, when you marry a woman, you literally mortgage your life away for her. And you write to her in the ksuba that any assets that I've purchased or that I will ever purchase, any assets that I've ever come into, they are meshubah to your ksuba. That's what you say when you're marrying a woman. But when you are married to a Yavama, when one does Yibam, he doesn't have that. He's not so obliged to her. So therefore, there's much more security that a regular married woman has than a Yavama, because a regular married woman knows that everything this guy owns is liened to pay off my ksuba. So by a Yavama, you shouldn't do that. You know why? Because she doesn't feel so secure, because she doesn't have all of your assets liened. So therefore, we don't want to limit it to this little piece of diamond or whatever it is that you want to set aside. A malacha by a married woman, the Kesubos, where you wrote the kanoi du kanina, you owe her everything. Maybe she'll accept that. A mashmal that she doesn't. So on its face, this Gemara makes no sense at all, because I don't understand. What's the difference if I write the kanoi du kanina? If I'm asking her to release the lien and tell her to accept this diamond, and that should be the whole shibud. So it doesn't make a difference what I originally wrote in her ksuba, that I liened everything, because right now I'm asking her to release all that lien. So why would the Gemara think that that's more secure? So Tosfos explains Rashi. So I'm just going to look at the second Tosfos on the top. From Rashi, it's mashma, the be'ishtay, by your wife, even shekatz of law. Since he wrote the kanoyu kanina, basically he writes to her that everything I have is meshubah to your ksuba. Even if I ask her to put the ksuba on this diamond, it doesn't help. Even if that diamond gets lost after I ask her to put all of the shibud only on this diamond and release the shibud for my properties, I might have asked her to do that, and she might have agreed to do that, but it doesn't have an impact, because my nechasim are meshubed regardless. And therefore, I would have thought that I could do that, because anyway, she's at no risk. Because anyway, all of my assets are still obliged to her. Kamashma that you can't do that. Why in the world can't you do that? There's zero risk to her, because all of my assets are still meshubed. It's Doc Tosfos because she doesn't realize it. You cannot tell her, I want to be miyachid this diamond for your ksuba. You know why? Because she doesn't realize that she's still fully protected. Chivin is svura, the less law, since she thinks that that's the only thing that's going to be meshubet to her ksuba, and you've released the lien from all your other properties, even though it's in fact not effective, but she thinks it works. Therefore, lesom chadaita. Now she's uneasy in that relationship because she thinks that she doesn't have enough recourse because if that thing goes missing, she has no way to collect her ksuba. Avogam de Islam, even though in fact she's wrong and she does have full security, she just doesn't realize it, and she's uneasy, and therefore have a bilos and bilusnus. If you live with a woman who doesn't have the full security of a ksuba, that's a bilusnus. That's an interesting finish. I'm telling her I want to designate this as a ksuba. It doesn't release any liability whatsoever. She still has the full lien on all my assets, but since she doesn't realize that, she feels insecure, and therefore you're not allowed to do that. Okay, Zok Gemara Vayki. Garsha, if you divorced her, ein law ela ksubasa. She gets her ksuba. That's not a chiddush. Whenever you divorce a wife, you give her her ksuba, and then you could keep the rest of the assets. So we're talking about a guy who did yibum, and after he did yibum, he divorced his wife. If he divorced his wife after he did yibum, he pays her ksuba. Now he is released all of the assets that he yashed from his brother. He's released. So originally he yashed, let's say, $500 million from his brother, and on account of $100,000 that he's going to have to pay ksuba, all those assets are locked. He can't sell a single property. If he divorces her, he can pay her up $100,000, and now he can liquidate any property that he wants. We're talking about Garsha in like Garsha. After he divorces her, yes, then he could liquidate the properties. But before he divorces her, he can't liquidate anything. That is the chiddush of Rababa. Rababa told us that the only way for him to be able to liquidate the properties is if he divorces her. If you remember, Rababa said if it's a kohen, he has to beg her and plead with her and convince her to let him liquidate. But if it's a Yisrael, all he has to do is divorce her. He can liquidate whatever he wants, and then he can take her back if he wants.
Yosy, this is a way for him. This is the makar of the previous case where the other brother wanted to get in on the action, because if the first brother goes and does yibum, he gets $100 million from the brother that passed away, and all the other people in the family get nothing. He goes and he divorces her, and he's left with all the money.
That's right. That's exactly how it works.
Maybe that's why that case was so.
That's why that guy, the brothers, didn't want to let him get away with it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Zok to Gemara. Hechzira. The Hechzira harei k'chal anoshim ve'in lo ela ksubasa. If he takes her back, then she's like anyone who would remarry, and she gets her ksuba. Zok to Gemara. I don't understand what the chiddush of the Mishnah is. Hechzira my kamash malan. We know that when you marry a woman and you divorce her and you take her back, you've taken her back under the same terms as the original marriage. Tanina, we have a Mishnah that says, if you divorce your wife, umachsira, and you take her back, we assume that all of the conditions are the same. So what is the chiddush? I want to add, there's actually a Chita Mukubetes who brings down, I think from our Rabbeinu Yoino, that this that we say, if you divorce your wife and you take her back, she goes back to the same terms. That's speaking if you never paid her ksuba yet. If you divorced her and you didn't pay up her ksuba, and before you pay up her ksuba, you change your mind and you decide to marry her back, then she just goes back to the original ksuba that was never paid out in the first place. But there are those who learned that even if you pay her out in full, if you marry her again, it's assumed that you married her on the same terms. So whatever your first ksuba was is what your second ksuba will be. I'm sure if you spoke out differently, it would work. But I assume this is halacha by default. If you just take a woman back and you don't specify, we assume that you're taking her back based on the original contract of the first ksuba. So Zok to Gemara, why does our Mishnah tell us this? We already have a Mishnah. Zok to Gemara, Ma'od Tema. I would have thought Ishtai, Dafka, a regular wife, not a Yavama. Ishtai who, the E Kasav law, Ksuba Minei. A regular wife who, when he negotiated with her, he agreed with her upon the Ksuba. So therefore, if he divorces her and he takes her back, it goes back to the original terms that he had agreed to in the first marriage. Aval Yavimtai, the law EU Kasav law, he never made this deal with her. This is a deal that his brother made with her. So if he divorces her, now he's taking her back and he's marrying her, he should be able to renegotiate new terms. You might say that now it's his own personal ksuba. It's not still connected to the first brother. Kamash Malon, that if he divorces the Shivama and takes her back, his own nechazim, his personal nechazim, are not liable to pay the ksuba. It defaults back to the old original ksuba where she could only collect from the assets that her first husband left over.
So it still continues now. He cannot sell any of the brother's assets as well.
Yeah, I believe so. It's only while she's divorced, he can quickly liquidate. Once he takes her back, it's locked again. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Bereshina, originally, so now the Gemara is going to give us a little bit of a history, how it came to be that we lean his whole life to pay for her ksuba. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Bereshina, you coach from the Basula Masayim Ulamanamana. All they did was they wrote an IOU. When they married a woman, they said, if I divorce you, I'm going to pay you Masayim. But there was no collateral. And because of that, no women wanted to marry men because they never felt secure that they'll be protected in the event of a divorce. And therefore, the men got old, and they never got married. You know why the men never got married? Because the women didn't want to get married. I love the way the Gemara described it from the man's perspective. The men refused to marry women. You know why they refused to marry women? Because the women didn't want to marry them, because they didn't feel secure. But again, Kesubos is very much from the male perspective. It's like a famous story, the Ich will sie nicht. Right? So, you know the story of the will sie nicht. The boy was ready to shidduch, and the chaplain says, why aren't you marrying this girl? So the boy says, Ich will sie nicht. So the chaplain says, she's a beautiful girl, she's smart, why don't you want her? So the boy says, listen carefully, Ich will sie nicht. So that's what this is. Well, he knows nothing until Shemi ben Shetach came along and he fixed it. He made it the kana that all of a person's assets are lien to pay the ksuba. Now women felt confident marrying because they knew that they'll for sure be able to collect. Now we have another brayta that gives us a little bit more detail. They just rewrite an IOU. Well, you must they would get old, the men, and no one would marry them. They made it the kana to make it more specific. So now the brayta is telling us how this developed. So it was like it evolved. So the first takana was they'll leave the money in their father's household. Now you have to understand, if the money would have been kept in their household, the money of the ksuba, the cash, then if they needed, let's say the guy was short on cash, he could ask his wife, can I borrow $100 from the ksuba? I'll put it back in a week. But once he puts the money by his shver's house, now he had no access to it anymore. So as far as he was concerned, it was already paid out. That caused the problem. Because whenever he got angry at her, he would be happy to divorce her. Go to your home, to your father. I don't need you anymore. It made it easy for people to want to divorce their wives because it didn't cost them anymore. They had already laid out the money. So therefore, they were very frivolously divorcing their wives. So therefore, they made it the kana. They should keep it in her mother-in-law's house, which Rashi says in their own house. So therefore, if it's in my own house, so if I need money, I can borrow from it. If I can convince her to let me borrow from it. So therefore, I won't want to divorce so fast because I do like having that little stacks of cash if I need to borrow from it. So that would be that would discourage him from divorcing her because he's going to lose his stack of cash.
Yeah, see, this is a riot that you move into the girl moves into her in-laws' house when they get.
I hear it. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Ashirais oises oisa kaltishal kesed. What they would do is they actually wouldn't keep it as cash. What they would do is they would make it into a kaltosh. We learned what that is. Imagine you have two baskets that you sew their bottoms together. So then you could put one on as a hat, and then the top she could put her kelim in. So that's what she made, and she made those out of silver mishalzov, and they wore it. It was with them the whole time. Now Tozer says if they were desperate for money, the husband can ask his wife, "Can you do me a favor? Can I borrow that? I'll pawn it off. I'll borrow money against it, and I'll pay it off, and I'll get it back for you." So she had more control over it because she was always wearing it, so she didn't have to worry that if her husband dies, her husband's Yerusha would take the cash away and she won't be able to locate it. This was always with her, so it did give her some confidence. She was control of it, but it also was a good blend because if he was desperate for cash, he was still able to borrow against it, so he wouldn't be so eager to dump her. And the poor people, he would make for her literally a pot to piss in. But Tosha says that's not what it means. Tosha, the bottom Tosha says, they made a bucket of copper which they would keep grapes in that she was carrying to the press to press them. But whatever it is, it was a much more modest keli that she had as collateral. But still, they still, since the headdress was there, she had control over it. Whenever a husband would get angry, again, it would be easier for him to divorce her. He would say, take your suba on your head and get out. So once again, it wasn't protecting the marriages. All of his assets were so there was no specific item that was designated for it, but they were pleased because now they would have security that they'd be able to collect their shub. So Baruch Hashem, we finished. I believe this is the 8th parak we finished. Yeah. So B'lineder Hadron Allah Isha Hadron Allah Isha Hadron Allah Isha. Let's start the next parak. It's a very easy blot, so it'll go very quickly. So we're on daf now, Samach Gimel. As we switch over, I'm going to say Gemach Sim Tova to Rav Ephraim, Gemach Sim Tova to Benzi. We should have a git bench they are.
Amen. Thank you. Same to you.
Amen.
Okay. Hakoyz of Lisha. This is unbelievable, this daf. Because this is a daf of a big talker and a little doer. Imagine they're making an appeal in shul, and the guy says 10,000, and then he says quietly pennies. You want the schwitz that he's a big knocker, he's throwing his money around, but Lamasa, he intended to do much, much less than what he seemed to have publicly expressed. So look at this case over here. A man writes a star to his wife. Din udvorim ein li b'nechasayach. I want nothing to do with any of your benefits. Now, Rashi on Amud Beis, and we're going to learn it soon, says that a man generally is entitled to 3 benefits from his wife. Benefit number 1 is he gets to eat the pears of her nichsei meluk. Benefit number 2 is should she pass away in his lifetime, he yarshins any properties that she has. And benefit number 3 is if she tries selling those properties while she's alive, while they're married, the husband could break that sale. He could veto that sale. So out of these 3 tzchusim that he had, he wrote to his wife, Din udvarm ein li b'nechsayach. I want nothing to do with any of your benefits. Anybody would agree that this pretty much sounds like he wants to relinquish all 3 benefits. Zok to Mishnah, that's not exactly how we interpret it. We interpret it to mean the minimum of what it could mean. He hasn't given up his rights to eat pears. He still has the right to the pears. And he also hasn't given up his rights to inherit her. So what did he mean? He meant one of the things. What could he possibly have meant to relinquish? What right is he giving up? The third right, if she sold it or gave it away, that he will not be able to prevent. So his big proclamation, I want nothing to do with you, he was really only giving away one benefit that he had. And the Gemara is going to clarify there's 3 benefits. How do you know which benefit he meant to give away and which 2 benefits he meant to retain? So the Gemara is going to explain where we get this from. But basically, he says, I want nothing to do with it, and we just limit it to one small benefit that he gave up. Big talker. What if he wrote, Katav law, Dinu Dvarim, Ein li b'nechsayach, but he added, Uvepei Reisayach. So he specifically mentioned, I don't want your parents either. So then he's given up that as well. So now he's given up. Now he's given up Paris. He's already given up the right to veto a sale, but he hasn't given up the third right, the Motzaei Rosh Hashana. But if she dies, he's still Yarshim her, because there we don't see that he specified that he's giving up that right. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if he gave up his peros, he will be able to eat the peros of the peros. And what the peros of the peros means, the Gemara will tell us. But whatever it is, even though he's given up the peros, Zok Rabbi Yehuda, he's not giving up the peros of the peros until he's very specific. Din udvarim ainli b'nechsayich uveperesein uveperesein ad oil. Now he's giving up all the pears and any progeny that comes out of those pears. What if he wrote Kosov lo din udvarim ainli b'nechsayich uveperesein uveperesein b'chayich uvemoisach? So then that relinquishes everything. So the first thing we get to relinquish right away is this veto. We've already relinquished the pairs and pairs. We've relinquished his right to eat the pairs. So therefore, but since he said b'chayich, he's also specifying that he's giving up his benefit that he inherits her. And therefore, v'meisa in the yard. If he specifically said, "I'm not going to yarshin her, I'm giving up that right," he has that right to give up that right. But Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, he cannot give up that right. In Mesa Yerushalayim, even if she dies, he's going to yarshin her, even though he relinquished that right, because he doesn't have a right to relinquish a right that the Torah gave him. You can't undo what the Torah says. The Torah says you get it. If you try to change the rules of Yerusha that the Torah lays out, it does not work. Correct, Rashi. It worked for him to get rid of the Paris. So Rashi answers, although Paris is not the right, it's Takanta the Rabbanani. The Rabbanan just gave it to him as a benefit. At the Takanta the Rabbanan, he has the right to say, I don't want. But if Yerusha the right, so he can't change. That's the Metzias. That's how things work. He actions his wife. He cannot change the succession that the Torah lays out. Our Mishnah says that this Dinah Dvar Melach, he wrote to her in a star. Reb Chia said he didn't necessarily have to write it in a star. Even if you say this verbally, all the halachas of the Mishnah apply. Even if you wrote it, how could he just, if something belongs to you, you can't just say, I want nothing to do with it. There's no kinyan. If I own something, I can't say, I want nothing to do with it, and automatically magically becomes yours. If I want to transfer something that belongs to me, to you, we have to make a proper kinyan. So how does this work? He can just say, poof, I don't want anything to do with it. But Tanya, we learned, what if you have a friend and you are a shutuf with him, you are partners in a property, and you told your shutuf, Dinu dvar, ein li al sadasu, I want nothing to do with this field, ve'ein li esak ba, I want no business with it, and I am withdrawn from it. It's nothing. Because the only way for you to transfer what you own to your friend is with a kinyan, not with saying any random clause that you want. So if that's the case, in our Mishnah as well, if you have the schus of repairs, or you own the schus of repairs, you own the rights to yarshin her, so how could you just say, I don't want it? It doesn't work. You have to have some way to be makneh to her. Zok to Gemara, Amr Dever Bianai, we're talking about these chusim before he actually got them. Because of Lavoida Arusa. You know when he wrote, I don't want them? Before he got them, when he was only in Arusa before the Nesuin. These benefits only come by the Nesuin. So he said, I'm making Nesuin on you, but I don't want to accept those rights. You could reject acceptance of those rights. But once you own something, the only way to get rid of it is to give it away with a kingdom. Kidur Rav Kahana, like Rav Kahana said, Rav Kahana, if someone got Yerusha from his father, there's nothing he can do to stop it from coming to him. That's how the world works. But what if he's getting Yerusha from his wife that he only gets it from his wife because he married her. So that's Yerusha that he had a hand in getting. That that a person could make a t'nai that I don't want to get it. So a person could say when he makes nisuin, I don't want to accept it because he doesn't have it yet. And similarly, what Rava said, if someone said, I don't need it to the Chachamim are gifting me something, I don't need the gift. The going to, like this case, which we're going to soon see what case that is, Shaimin law, you listen to him, and once we learn the case, it's actually Shaimin law, you listen to her. Mike going to, what is the case that Rav was talking about? We know a woman is entitled to support from her husband, and it's a tit for tat, the husband's entitled to whatever she produces if she has a job. And he can force her to get a job. She can say, Chachamim, thank you for your takana, but no thanks. I don't need him to support me, and I don't want to work. So you see that a person can reject a takana derabah. Why would a woman do something like that? Why would a woman say, I don't want mizainis? So Rashi actually explains. So I'm on Rashi 3 lines up in the skinny lines. Actually, I'll go 4 lines up. It's referring to the support that the Chachamim or Misakin, a wife gets from her husband in lieu of her earnings that she gives to him. The Omer, if she said, I don't need this takana that the Rabbanan did for my good. And why do they do it? They were concerned for all women, because not all women earn enough to survive. Since some women don't earn enough money to feed themselves, we want to protect those women. And therefore, they mandated that the husband have to support the wife. And in lieu of that, whatever they produce will go to their husband. So this woman said, I don't need your help. Thanks, but no thanks. I'm a fancy lady. I don't want to work. Not I don't want to give him my paycheck. I don't want to work at all. So how am I going to survive? I'm telling you, I'll go to the good every morning. I'll eat chicken. I'll make sure to come to shul for the kiddush. I don't need his mizainis, but I don't want to get a job. So that's one reason why a woman would refuse. Or what if she's a cardiologist or a neurologist? Oh, yes, yukara. I'm a very high-paid person. Yes, I make way more than what I live off. So why in the world would I want to give that to my husband? Keep your mizainis, and I'll keep my pay. So you can do that. So frankly, Gemara, if you're going to tell me, now a woman can do this even after she's married, even though she already owns that right to get supported, she could reject it at any time during her marriage. So if that's the case, frankly, Gemara, back to our Mishnah, why in our Mishnah do we say that if he was already married to her, he cannot reject those things without a kinyan? And we have to say the Mishnah is speaking before he made Nisuin, and he's not accepting them. The woman, even after she has the schus, even after she's being supported, at any moment, she could say, I don't want it anymore. So tomorrow, I'll tell you why. Amar Abaye, Nisua Yadoi Ki Yada. When you're married to a woman, her hand is like your hand. So therefore, even if it's Darabana and it says Kana, you can't reject it. You know why? Because everything that she owns, you own. So there's no way to give it to her. Because when you're giving it to her, you're giving it back to yourself. So therefore, the only way to reject these benefits would be before the Nisuin. Rav Amar Yadai Adifa Biyada. Rav holds a married woman, she has less hand in her assets than her husband does. Now, Lagabe our sugya, it doesn't really matter if it's Yadai Yada, if it's Yadai Adifa Biyada. Either way, once she's in Suah, he can't relinquish his rights, because if he relinquishes them to her, he controls her hand as well. So therefore, it has to be speaking by an Arusa. So what is this machlekes between Abaye and Rava? if a married woman, if his hand is as strong as her hand, or if his hand is even stronger, we learned a couple of days ago that a woman who is in between husbands, her husband died, and she's waiting for a husband to do ibum on her. The Gemara discusses, what if she dies during that period? Her family has certain rights to her property, but her husband's family also has right to her property. So who does her property go to? So Beis Shammai said, since they both have a claim on her properties, you split it. Beis Hillel said no. There's 3 asset classes, and you look at each asset class on its own to determine if it's more with her family or if it's more with his family. So for instance, the Kesubos of Manu Messiah that he would have to pay her when he divorces her, that's surely in control by his family. So if she dies, his family keeps that. But what about her Nitzei Maluk, the property that she brought in? Those are for sure closer to her family, so those will go to her family. So that's the machlokes we had in the Mishnah. Rava and Abaye have a discussion. When did she yarshin this property? Let's talk about a Nitzei Maluk. When did she yarshin it? If she yarshined it from her father while she was married to her first husband, even those Nitzei Maluk will go to her husband's family, according to Rava. You know why? Because Yadoi Adifa Miyada. When she's married to her first husband and she gets something, her husband has more control over that than she does. So when is there a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel where we say it goes both ways? That's if her father only died after her husband died, while she was a Shemeres Yavim, where her Shemeres Yavim doesn't have such a tfisa on her possessions. That's when we say that the Nitzei Maluk that fell to her goes to her side of the family. Abaye said, Nesua is Yadai Ki Yada. It doesn't make a difference. Even if these Nechasim fell to her while she was married to her first husband, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel still have the same machlokes. So this is not at all relevant to our sugya, but it happens to be a side piece of information about the machlokes of Abaye. Okay, so let's just do an accounting of what we have over here. We have a Mishnah that tells us that before he's Nesua, he could reject any of the benefits that come from her. However, even though he's a big talker and he said, I don't want any benefits, we always assume that he meant to be as least generous as possible. So he's either only giving up his right to veto a sale, or maybe if he said Peiris, he's also giving up his right to have the Peiris. And if he says then he's also giving up his right to inherit her. Okay, Ibaylu, the Gemara has a question. This question, Rashi says, has nothing to do with our sugya. It's talking about a person who told his partner, Din udvarim ainli al sadazu. I want nothing to do with this field that we're partners in. We know that doesn't work. But what if they made a kinyan? What if kanam yada? What does kanam yada mean? My partner gave me a shmata, and I picked it up. So I made a kinyan chalipit. I picked up the shmata. With that, he'll be cutting something. But what if I wanted to solidify the transaction where I said didn't dvarim ainli al sadazu, and I solidified it with a kinyan? What do you say? Is the kinyan just reinforcing the din dvarim, which means the kinyan is reinforcing an invalid transaction, but it's nothing? Or do you say the kinyan is a standalone kinyan, and that would work to transfer my portion of the property? So what if they made a kinyan in addition to handing over the star that had an invalid transaction on it? Now, if you made a kinyan in conjunction with that star, basically you're just trying to solidify the transaction described in the star, which is invalid. So it's nothing. If you made a transaction as a parallel with the star, we'll say that the kinyan you made stands on its own as a kinyan, and in fact, you were makna your property to your shutuf. Amar Abaye said, Mistaver Milsa de Rabbi Yosef Lo'ira. I would agree to Rabbi Yosef that the transaction is not valid if right after if right after they did this transaction, the person who gave the field away said, no, I never meant to give it away. I want my field back. So that shows clearly he had no intention of giving it away. I will blame it. What if he did this transaction and his friend moved into the field, and then 3 days later he comes and says, no, it's my field. Then you say Meguva Shokarka. Then you say Avada was a real Kenyan. Why is he coming 3 days later? Because he spoke to his lawyer, and his lawyer gave him away to get out of it. But Avada at the time he made a special Kenyan. Amar Ameimer, if they made a Kenyan in addition to this invalid star, it's a Kenyan. And in fact, it transfers the property over to his partner. Rabashi told the Meimer, when you're paskening that it's a good sale, is that be'oirer? Is that even if right away he changed his mind? Or only if he left it for a couple of days? What's the difference? Exactly like we said on the Midrash. There's a shaila if it's a good transaction, if it was oimer or not. Amarlei, so Meimer answered back, Loi Shamili. I didn't hear about Rabbi Yosy. Koloimer Loi Svirli. When I mean to say that I don't agree with him. I held no matter what, it would be considered a good sale and a good transaction. Zog to Gemara Imkein Lo Makasab. If he didn't mean to give her anything, why did he write Din Udvarim Ainli B'Nechsayach? I don't want to have anything to do with your properties, is what he told his wife, or what he wrote to his wife. What did he mean? If he gets to keep the payers and he gets the argument, well, what did he mean? So to Gemara, the Gemara said to the Mishnah, what do you mean? He just meant to give up his right to veto a sale. Frankly, Gemara, I don't understand. She has a star that has a very broad lashon. So let her tell him, mikol mili salikas nafsha. Your star is very broad, and you've given up all your rights, and I'm not giving you anything anymore. Omar Abaye is up to Abaye. This is a rule you can take to the bank. Yad balashtar. Whenever you have a star, and the star is not specific, it's not crystal clear, then we only can extract enough of a right from the star to the bare minimum, not one iota more than the bare minimum that the star could be. So now that we've established that, there's 3 rights that we're discussing: the right to inherit her, the right to eat payers, and the right to veto a sale. So the Mishnah says the minimum right which he's giving up is the right to veto a sale. Who said that's the right to give up? Maybe he wants to keep the veto. Maybe he's giving up the payers. Zog to Gemara, maybe that's what he wants to give up. Amar Abaye, that's not das ha'odam. Boitzina tav mikra. If I have a choice of having payers right now, or the ability to veto a sale that she might or might not do, I'm going to grab what I have. Like the famous saying, 1 bird in the hand is better than 2 birds in the bush. I'm going to go for, if a farmer tells me, you can either take this small little gourd now, or you come back in 4 weeks, take a big one. I'll take what I can get right now. So too with this, I'd rather pay and give up the right to veto or sale. Maybe what he's giving up his right is to yarden her, but he wants to retain the right to veto or sale. Amar Abaye, Misa Shlicha Mechir L'Shlicha. Every woman dies. Therefore, I know one day I'm going to be able to yarden her. So I don't want to give up that right. But to give up the right to veto her sale, I don't mind giving up that right. Because it's unlikely that a woman would ever sell property that she brought in from her family. Like we said earlier, she wants to hold on to this property, its legacy from her family. So therefore, since it's unlikely that that's going to occur, he'd rather give up the right to veto it because he's not worried about that happening anyway. When someone wants to give something up, he'd rather give up something that doesn't mean so much to him because it's not likely to be relevant. But something that's common, like her dying and him yardening her, that's something he won't give up. So therefore, since it's unclear which of the 3 rights he's giving up, we're figuring out that the most likely right that he's giving up is the right that, by giving it up, it impacts him the least, and that is the right to veto a sale. Rabashi Omar, it's not fuzzy at all. We're not saying it's not clear to star, and because of that, we're saying he gave up the easiest thing to give up. No, the words that he said actually indicates what he wants. Because he wrote, Dinu dvorim eli b'nichsaya. I don't want anything to do with your actual assets. But v'loy b'peres, saying, I never said I don't want to have anything to do with your pairs. I said I don't want to have to do with your assets. I'm not giving up your pairs. He also said, b'nichsaya, I don't want to have anything to do with your assets. After you die, they're not your assets. So the only thing that he could be referring to when he says, I want nothing to do with your assets, it has to be referring to a sale. Because it cannot be referring to Achar Misa. Because it's Nechsayach. It's your possession after you're dead that you don't have possessions. And it can't mean Paris because it says Nechsayach. So from the words he said, actually, we see that he meant only to relinquish the right to veto herself. According to Yehuda, even though he said, I'm not going to eat her pear, I'm giving up the pears, he hasn't given up the pears. What are pears and what are pears? We learned the Mishnah, we didn't know what it meant, now we're going to know. What if she brought karka into the marriage? The odds are pears, and the karka produced fruit. So the halacha is rain pears. That's pears. That is the definition of pears. What happens if he didn't eat those pears? Rather, machar pears, he reinvested them. He sold the pears for cash. The lokach main karka, and he bought more property. The odds of pears, and now the property that he bought from the pears made new pears. Haray hain pears. That is what pears are. So Yehuda said, even if I say I'm going to give up my right to eat the pears, but I still can eat the pears, that's what it means. If he took the pears and he planted them, if he took the pears and he bought with them property, and then he planted in that property, and that grew, those are pears that Rabbi Yehuda holds he would be allowed to eat. He would retain that schus if he didn't specify that. Okay, Zok more iboilu. Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, peres dafka, or dilmad adam daf. According to Rabbi Yehuda said that the pears will be mutter to eat unless he says, I'm giving up my right to eat pears and peres ad oila. So there's two things he said. He spoke about peres and he spoke about ad oila. So the question is, what is the dominant word that's creating his release for the pears? Is it because he said the word pears, or is it because he said the words ad oila? Or maybe unless he says both peres and ad oilam, he wouldn't be giving up his rights to the pears. Let's think about it. If you're going to say that the main operative word is pears, so then why does Rabbi Yehuda list in the Mishnah that he also stuck in the word ad oilam? If that's not necessary, if by saying pears, it already relinquishes his rights to all future pears, then why did Rabbi Yehuda say that he also stuck in the word ad oilam? If it's not necessary, ad oilam lonely. Zok tomorrow, I'll tell you why. Hakamash Malon, all Rabbi Yehuda was trying to tell you is given the cause of law, peres, command the cause of law ad oilam. He just wanted to make it very clear in his halacha that if once you say peres, it doesn't just mean peres, it means the next generation and the next generation forever. So that's why he stuck in the word ad oilam, so that it would be clear to us that peres has the same impact as ad oilam. And if you're going to learn that the words that are the key words are the ad oilam, well then peres. Why did Rabbi Yehuda even mention that he said peres? That's also important. Hakamash Malon, Avagav, the cause of law, peres, even though he said, I'm relinquishing my right to peres, that wouldn't do the trick. He caused of law ad oilam in Eloi. Unless he wrote ad oilam, it would not relinquish future peres. And in Tim Salem Tarfayu, Dafka, and if you're going to say that you need both in order to affect this halacha, that forever and ever he doesn't get the peres, Tarta lovely, why do you need both? So more tricha. Because of law peres, if he only said peres, but he didn't say ad oilam, well, because of ad oilam, Havamina, I would have thought that Pere Paris the second generation Paris he can't eat. Aval Pere the Pere Paris, but the third generation ultimately could eat. That's why he needed to say ad oilam, so that we know that he's giving up his rights to any future Paris, any future generation of Paris. But because of that oilam, if he only said ad oilam, then I would have thought, because of Paris, you know what I would have thought? I would have thought he only is referring to the first generation Paris. I would have thought he's just saying that those Paris, I'm never ever going to have enough from. But you wouldn't know that the oilam means to include future generation of Paris. So therefore you have to say, I'm not going to need Paris or Paris forever. So then it's clear that I'm saying all of the future generations of Paris that come out of this tree or field, I am relinquishing my rights to.
So the land that he ended up buying from it, he also relinquishes?
Correct. If he says Paris, he's relinquishing everything.
The land as well. So the land does not come to him if she
of course
passes
he's
away.
relinquishing because what he purchased the land with, he had relinquished. Yeah, so give everything up. Okay, now the Gemara is another shot. Ibailu. What if he wrote, didn't dvarm ein li b'nechsayich u'bepeir Paris, but he didn't say ad oilo. I'm sorry, he didn't say beperis. He says nechsayich u'peir Paris, but he missed the first generation. Mao sheyochal Paris. Can he eat the first generation Paris? Because mi peir Paris solak nafshe. He only said, I don't want anything to do with the second generation Paris. But mi peir lo solak nafshe. He never said on when he says Paris, he means even Paris. But Avada, he's giving up his right to the Paris. Dr. Gemara Pshita, it's posted the Michol Mili Solak Nafshe. It's got to be that he gave up everything. You know why? The Amat mi Paris Solak Nafshe, but mi Paris Lo Solak Nafshe. If you're going to say he has the right to consume the Paris, just not the Paris, well, if he consumed the Paris, how in the world did the Paris show up? Kivan Dachlinu the Paris Mehecha. The only way he can have Paris is if he took those fruit and sold them and bought land with them. But if he consumed them and ate them, there's no way they ever had Paris.
Go half and
That's
half.
not a good kasha. Look at the Mishnah itself. Rabbi Yehuda said, Paris. He always can eat the Paris unless he says Paris and Paris lo'ilam. The question is, Paris, if he's going to eat the Paris, well then, Kivan the Achlinu Leperi, I'm sorry, if he's going to be able to eat the Paris over there, Paris Ma'echa, where in the world will there be Paris from? Ella, what are you going to have to say? That even though he had a right to eat the Paris, maybe he didn't eat all of them. And the question is, if he didn't eat all of them, even though he had a right to do that, and he instead bought property with those Paris, that's what the question is about. A little bit of shiur. We have the same question. What if he didn't ask himself to eat the Paris, but he also didn't eat them either, and he used them to reinvest? Would that now say that the Paris are, well, he said the Paris he doesn't want, but he could still have Paris. So it's possible that he's allowing himself to eat Paris. He's not allowing himself to eat Paris, and you could still have Paris, even though he was allowed to eat the Paris, because just because he was allowed to eat them, who said he ate them? Okay, Dr. Gemara Vayter. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said that even if you say, I don't want to yarshin her, you can't do that. Because the Torah says you yarshin her, you can't change the rules of Yerusha that the Torah set down. Amar Rav halachish Reb Shimon ben Gamliel v'lo mitameh. Rav agrees to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel that you cannot relinquish your right to Yerusha, but Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said the reason was because you could not be masna mashakos of a Torah. I disagree with that reasoning, but I agree that you cannot relinquish Yerusha. Dr. Gemara, my halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel v'lo mitameh. What does that mean? If you want to say that he passes like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, the Omar and Mesa Yerusha, even though he says I relinquished Yerusha, it doesn't work. He still gets Yerusha. But he's not following the same reasoning as Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel savar matana masna mashakos v'Torah t'nai bottle. Reb Shimon held that since it's masna mashakos v'Torah, the t'nai is bottle, and that's why he gets the Yerusha. But Rav has a different reason. But Rav savar t'nai kain. Rav holds that when you're masna mashakos v'Torah, it works. So he argues with the reasoning of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So if that's the case, why does he get to Yerusha if he relinquished it? He could be masna mashakos v'Torah because savar Yerusha bal derabbanan. First of all, he argues with Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and he says the right for a husband to yarshin from his wife is not a deraisa right; it's a derabbanan right. And even though he could relinquish a deraisa right, he cannot relinquish a derabbanan right. That's counterintuitive. If anything, a deraisa is more strong. So the Gemara v'Chachamim also chizik l'devreya Yosy mishal Torah. Sometimes when the Rabbanim make a takana, like he gets Yerusha, they give it more strength than even a deraisa because they want people to take them seriously. Zok the Gemara, that will not work. That will not work. Moving on to Daf Peidal and Amaral. Tisava Rav Tnai Kaim. So you're telling me that Rav holds that Masna Masha Kosav Torah the Tnai is Kaim. That's not true. That's patently false. I'll show you. Rav was very clear that Masna Masha Kosav Torah Tnai Bottle, which means he holds exactly like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. For Itmar we learned we know the halacha is you overcharge somebody by 1/6. If it's exactly 1/6, you have to pay back. If it's more than 1/6, it's not his bottle. What if some used car salesman crook says, sign this paper as is, no refunds, no warranty implied or included? So you tell the guy, I'm selling you this product, but I'm not that there's no I know. No matter how much I ripped you off, too bad. So the halacha is Rav Amar Yesh Lo Yalav Eino. You can't do that. You cannot make a t'nai to violate the raisa which asks someone from doing it. So you see clearly Rav holds that Masna Masha Kosav Torah t'nai bottle, which is exactly what Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says. So you said that Rav agrees with the psak of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, but not the reasoning. Clearly, you see, he agrees with the reasoning as well. Shmuel holds you could be master. Ella, we have to regroup. Halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Paskins like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The Omar Hamasna Mashakos of the Torah T'nai bottle. Clearly, Rav agrees that you cannot make a T'nai to change the Torah. But Velab Mitamei, but he doesn't agree completely to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Savar Mesa Yerishena. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel in our Mishnah says that he can't stop the Yerusha. He gets the Yerusha even though he tried to reject it. Rav Savar Mesa Yerishena, and Rav argues on the psak, and he holds that if he relinquishes the right to Yarshaner, he doesn't get the Yerusha. But that's the opposite of what we said. We just said earlier that he agrees to the psak, not to the reasoning. But based on what we just said, here he's saying the opposite, that he agrees that Mashakos is bottle, but he doesn't agree with the halacha in our Mishnah. So that's not what we said. So Ella, let's regroup and let's try something else. Halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel the Amar in Mesa Yerushalayim. He possibly like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds that he cannot relinquish the Yerusha, but he doesn't agree with the reasoning. Why? Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Sobar b'daraisa t'naiba. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds that if it's a daraisa halacha like Yerusha, the t'nai is bottle, I cannot relinquish Yerusha. Habid Rabbanan, if it was a derabanan dekarai, t'nai kayim, there Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds that your t'nai could break a t'nai of a derabanan, a t'kan of a derabanan. Rav Sobar afilu b'derabanan t'nai bottle. But the Rav holds you can't even be masna on the Durabanan. Frank the Gemara, so that once again doesn't fit in. Because now you're saying that Rav agrees completely with Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Sai agrees to the halacha that he still gets the Yerusha, and Sai agrees to the reason, because it's a deraita, and you cannot be masna mashakos of a Torah. That happens to be, Rav goes a step further. Rav Maisavu. Rav says even by Durabanan. But that's not relevant. In our Mishnah, Rav is agreeing to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel both to the psak and to the reason behind it. That can't be psak. Ella, let's say differently. Halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, Tamar Motzaei Rosh Hashana. He agrees to the halacha that even though he tried to relinquish the Yerusha, he still gets it. But v'lav mitamei. But he has a different reason. The Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Sava Yerusha Sabal Daraisa. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel hold that the Yerusha of a husband yarshining his wife is daraisa, and therefore the reason why he can't relinquish that is because of Chalamas al Masha Kosav V'Torah Noibatel. But for Rav Sover Yerusha Sabal Darabanan, Rav disagrees with the svara of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel because he holds Yerusha Sabal is not daraisa; it's darabanan. But he also happens to hold the Chachamim also physically devreim Kishal Torah. So now we have it perfect. They both agree to the halacha that if you try relinquishing your rights to her Yerusha, it doesn't work. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says the reason is because the rights to the Yerusha are deraisa, and you cannot relinquish a deraisa right. But Rav says no. The rights to Yerusha is derabanan, but you're not allowed to relinquish a right that's derabanan either. So now we have a perfect understanding. But now the Gemara is saying is that Rav holds that Yerusha's abal is derabanan. The fact that a husband yarshins his wife is derabanan. I'm going to show you, Rav said, that the fact that a husband yarshins his wife is deraisa. But now Rabbi Yochanan ben Berekah Hayarish is ishtoi. What if someone yarshins his wife? So he yarshins the properties from his wife. Kam yovel, when you buy a property from somebody, kam yovel, the property goes back to the original owner. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Berekah says the same thing happens when you're yarshin your wife. If you yarshin your wife, kam yovel, yachser livnei mishpacha. Kam yovel, you have to give back the property to her family, as if you purchased it. But the inaka lehen min adam. But they have to pay, but they don't have to pay in full, which is a very weird halacha. The Gemara said this halacha makes no sense. My kosover, what does Rabbi Yochanan ben Berekah hold? If you hold that when a husband yarshin something, it's daraisa, amayatzer. If you buy something from somebody, it goes back by yovel. But if you yarshin, you don't give it back by yovel. Your Yerusha is permanent. So if there's a Yerusha daraisa that a husband yarshins his wife's properties, he doesn't have to give it back by yovel. Vider abanon, and if it's their abanon, meaning it goes back by yovel, davam maya viditayu. So if it goes back by yovel, why do they have to pay him off? Normally, when you buy a property from somebody and you give it back by yovel, it doesn't have to pay you for it. You have to give it back the way it is. So the understanding of Rabbi Yochanan ben Berekah's halacha is a mystery. So Rav helped us solve it. Rav lo'olim kosavar Yerusha abal deraisa. He holds Yerusha abal deraisa, meaning he yarshined his property and he doesn't have to give it back. So why did Rabbi Yochanan ben Berekah say he has to give it back? I'll tell you why. The property that we're talking about that you have to give back is a family plot where all the family is buried there. So if he gets to keep that plot, then they're going to have to bury their dead in another place, and their plot is going to get filled up with strangers. That's a humiliating blow to a family. So even though technically he yarshined it, and it's too bad for them, we come to their aid and we help them get their plot back. Since it's very humiliating to a family to lose their family plot, Amar Rabbanan, the Rabbanan made a takana, lishkal dmei. He has to give back the property, but at least the family has to pay him for it. So lishkal dmei v'lahader. So that's what the Rabbi Yochanan ben Berekah said. If someone yarshins his wife, come yovel, he should give back the property. Why? Because we're talking about a graveyard, a family plot, and we feel bad for the family to lose their plot, so we ask him to give it back, but they pay him for it. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Berekah says you're not giving a double. They don't have to pay him in full. Why don't they have to pay him in full? Why does he not have to pay them in full? Why do they not have to pay him in full? The May Keverishta, because you know who's buried in that plot of land? His wife, because she died. That's how he yarshined it in the first place. So he buried her there. That they're not mechuyev to pay for. He's mechuyev to pay for his wife's burial. So when they pay him for this plot of land, they can deduct from it the cost of his wife's plot.
What's the plot doing? What's this whole what's the family's whatever it is doing in her possession?
I
if
guess
there's other
she
family
was the only
around.
daughter. Maybe she was the only daughter, and she yardshed it from her father.
If she's the only daughter, then there's nobody else who wants it back.
Yeah, but maybe there's cousins. Maybe she yardshed the property that belonged to the grandfather, and there's other cousins.
I think you're getting mixed up. Why are we doing? Why isn't this tomorrow's blot, anyways?
Yeah, but I ended up getting to the Mishnah, so I wanted to catch up to the Mishnah.
Or plunge it.
So Zokta Kedetanya, you find that you try to protect plots because it says Amoicha Kvarei, V'derech Kvarei, my mother Yomakim Espeda. You someone sold this caver, and you sold the access to the caver, and we know when we bury someone, we stop 7 times, and we say Yosy V'Seisor 7 times. So all of those places, and if there's a place where they do a hesped along the way, all those places, even if we sold them, Boin B'nei Mishpacha V'Kayver Noisha B'Karcha. The family still has a right to bury their dead in that base island, because it's very humiliating that a family should lose their plot. So we make out the corner that they have a right to bury there. So whatever the case is, Rav explained, according to Rabbi Yechon ben Broika, that Yerushas Abal is Daraisa. So how could we earlier say Rav holds Yerushas Abal is Darabanan, and that's why he argues with Shimon ben Gamliel in our Mishnah? Rav, according to Rabbi Yechon ben Broika, said that Yerushas Abal is Daraisa. Zoktimar, that's true. Rav will tell me Rabbi Yechon ben Broika come on. Rav was just trying to explain, make sense out of Rabbi Yechon ben Broika. So he explained that Rabbi Yechon ben Broika must hold that Yerushas Abal is Daraisa. But V'leilo Svirle, he on the zone holds that Yerushas Abal is Darabanan. And that's why he's arguing on Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in our Mishnah. Okay, we will stop here. I'm sorry I went so far ahead, but we got here today. So then tomorrow we're going to be starting from here.
Where is this talking about? Eretz Yisrael or Chutz La'aretz?
I don't think it matters. It could be either way. Yerusha applies.
Since when do you have Yovel and Chutz La'aretz?
Oh, you're right. So it must be Eretz Yisrael because that's a very good point. If it's discussing Yovel, it must be speaking in Eretz Yisrael. Very good point.
Yeah, but isn't this after aren't these people in Pumpadisa and whatever? Isn't this all?
You told me Yovel is not relevant anymore?
Yeah.
I guess this was when Yovel was still relevant. Because nowadays we don't even keep Yovel. We don't even know when it is.
Right. And what's this thing about saying that Yerusha is Midaraisa? Is it the proportion is Midaraisa? Isn't it like, doesn't a person have a choice to say, okay, I'm not giving equal portions to each son? Don't they have a right to write a will?
Would you write a will? I wrote a will, right? So I'm allowed to give whatever I want to anybody that I want. Because the way it works is when you write a will, you're giving a gift to be chal right before you die. If you don't do anything and you leave it up to the government probate, so the Torah dictates how things are split up. But in a will, you can do anything you want.
So why does this Gemara go and say that this is something midaraisa? If in a will, you're really, the person is actually designating it, is actually
because this is not a will.
Happen.
What if she dies and she didn't write a will? So automatically he gets her nechasa.
Right, but the Gemara was talking about that a person cannot go and disavow their inheritance because it's already coming to you midaraisa.
Because the Torah says this is how property transfers. You can't change the mechanics of the Torah.
Okay, going back to the previous Gemara where it's talking about the ksuba, if she loses her ksuba, we're saying it's better to keep the land because you won't lose it versus the diamond.
Right.
So, and you said that the Gemara says that if somebody doesn't have their ksuba, the mamish can't continue living together, right? So what happens if a guy becomes destitute and he doesn't have a Masayim Kesef to pay? Does he have to stop? They have to separate?
So you're asking me, no, he doesn't, because when he married, you're asking me, he once had a lot of money, he married her, and he had to sell all his possessions because he went broke. So he doesn't have to divorce her because she has a right to reclaim any property that he sold. So she still has her security.
Oh, but let's say all he had was money when they got married. He had money.
If you only had cash and it went,
he spent it in Vegas.
So that's a very good question. So you're asking me, what if he lost all his money and he doesn't even have nechosim mishubadim, he doesn't even have karkoyis, So
Yeah.
that's a very good child. Would he be mechuyev? Would he be asked to live with his wife? Because now she has no security whatsoever.
I'm sure it's a shaila that comes up in Lakewood a lot because it's close to Atlantic City. All right.
A git shiur. We should have a wonderful sweet year. We should have brachas in every way possible, in health, in parnosa, in Yiddish Naches, in Shaduchim, in Chavos in Shalom Bayis, and everything. Everything should go our way. We're going to this year shouldn't be an uphill. This year should be like a cruise downhill. Everything should go smooth in our direction. Not everything we want to accomplish should come to us difficult with headaches and with stress. Things should just roll smooth.
Amen.
I mean.
Okay,